So you think silver's going nowhere, huh? Well, I got news for you. Something's coming up. I said something before about, March 4th. It was exact date after the time Paul Volcker said it was going to be a year and a half from time when things would really change. And, that was a start date, right? Approximate start date. Well, here's something coming up. This is actually right off the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, OCC.gov, Bulletin 2014.9. It's the Volker Rule. It's coming into effect on Tuesday, April 1st, 2014. That's when it starts. Now, it's not going to be like, it's going to change everything immediately, but that's the start, and it actually has to be all in effect by fully compliant. All the banks have to be fully compliant by July 2015. So it starts on April 1st, 2014, and they have to be fully compliant by July 2015. Now, there's also a prediction out there. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's per the Jewish calendar that by September 2015, on a 7-year cycle of the Jewish calendar, that's going to be the next major financial collapse, too. That's something else they were talking about. But this is right off the site, okay? This is not some, conspiracy blog here or anything. This is right off of the Office of Comptroller of Currency. So you're going to figure out, what does this have to do with silver? Oh, plenty. Plenty with everything. Prices, commodities, everything. Highlights of the financial regulations. Prohibits banks from engaging in short-term proprietary trading of certain securities, derivatives, commodity futures, and options on these instruments for their own accounts. One of the big contentions out there is that the price of commodities, especially like oil and things like that, is being rigged, right? Gold and silver and all that. Well, they're not going to be able to do that, okay? So another thing is impose limits on bank investments in and other relationships with hedge funds and private equity funds. They're imposing limits on their relationships with hedge funds, the banks and the hedge funds and the private equity funds. Provide exemptions for certain activities, including market-making activities, underwriting, risk mitigating hedging, trading in government obligations, insurance company activities, and organizing and offering hedge funds and private equity funds. So basically, they're segregating the banking and the risk factor all the way. In other words, banking is not going to be freaking playing markets and influencing markets. That's really what this is coming down to. And they have to be compliant. So, scale compliance requirements based on the size of the bank and the scope of activities. Larger banks are required to establish detailed compliance programs, and their chief executive officers must attest to the OCC, which is the Office of Comptroller of Currency, that the bank's programs are reasonably... See, Putin's all excited. Here's the cat right here, Here he is. Hi. He's all excited about this. He's over there jumping up and down on it. Get off the paper. I can read this. Anyway, larger banks are required to be compliant with the programs, and their chief executive officers must attest to the OCC that the bank's programs are reasonably designed to achieve compliance with the final regulations. Smaller banks engaged in modest activities are subjected to simplified compliance programs. So the big banks are really getting the screws turned to them. The big contention was about, all the big banks are manipulating all the commodities. They're holding down the price of silver. They're holding down the price of oil. People want that held down, right? Unless they're invested in it, right? That's gas in your car. I want it to go up, but anyway, they're holding down the price of silver. They're holding down the price of oil. They're holding down the price of gold, and it's all got. Actually, I'm going to tell you this though. We're seeing a spike up in food prices recently in 2014. If there were like 20-something%, they went up or something overall. I forgot what it was. It's all on the Commodity Research Bureau. There was a big spike. But that's not necessarily because of the currency problem or anything like that. That's actually due to the drought in California, which is a record drought. I think it has a lot to do with it because California does produce a lot of food in its country. And, there's been a lot of weather situations going on throughout the world. And I think that has a lot more to do with it. Some people are already making this association that the price of food going up has to do with the dollar falling right away. It's not falling right away. It's going to fall. And, all this stuff we've been saying all along, it's like, it doesn't happen in a day or 24 hours, but it is going to happen. It is going to happen. It's not going to happen 10 years from now. It's not going to happen 5 years from now. It's not going to happen 3 years from now. It's happening. It's starting to happen right now. So it's kind of interesting about this Volcker Rule, which is effective April 1st on 2014. That's pretty damn close to the time point when he said about a year and a half. People said they put exactly a year and a half from the time things would start to fall apart, and they said that they gave the date of March 4th, 2014. That was a year and a half ago when, from that time period prior, that Paul Volcker said if things aren't addressed right away by the new administration, whoever wins in 2012, that things would start to fall apart. That was not a cataclysmic date that March 4th is like the sky, the bottom's going to fall out. That is an approximate start date. Now, that very much seems to coincide with all these new rules that these banks have to comply with. Now, the other thing is, the U.S. is in a QE trap, man. And, this is the problem here because the argument is essentially that the risk of inflation are much higher now because of the QE that we've done. In other words, if we did not do QE, now that we're backing off QE, it's like, how do you unwind the balance sheet on the Federal Reserve? That's the real risk of inflation. It's almost like they put all this junk in their books, It's on the books, How do they get all this water out from behind the dam without it flooding the economy with inflation? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? So the risk of inflation right now, even though they're backing off on QE and they're letting off the gas, the risk of inflation is actually very high. It is high. So, anyway, I just want to put a side note here. I saw something on Russia Today, Communist Today, whatever you want to call it, about a smirking chick on there talking about female. I don't want to give her any kind of respect because she was talking about a poll that was put on the White House petition website about giving Alaska back to Russia, and they got 20,000 votes, and I was like, that means that we got 20,000 anti-American Russian supporters in this country. They're probably spies or some crap, and it's no doubt that it probably is, But Russia Today seemed to be, very much jumping for joy and laughing at that, and I'm thinking to myself, time to take the gloves off with Russia Today, man. Those guys are basically a bunch of damn communists that want to see the United States fall. So, when all this doom and gloom stuff comes about, just save your silver up. It'll protect you financially. Don't turn against the United States. Let's straighten out our problems. Let's not be the Russian Today cheerleader and cheering the death of the United States down like these other people in the alternative media, because that is definitely not my goal. I want to see the United States survive and thrive. And, it seems that the alternative media, unfortunately, has taken such a twist that it's totally anti-American. A lot of them are. Totally. And, anybody's going to freaking side with Russia all the way. I don't know. They're like dictators and a half, Whatever can I tell you? Vladimir Putin is a dictator. So if you're flag waving for that jerk, you're flag waving for Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Putin, right? Anyway, this stuff is going to happen. Like, silver's not going down to 10, 15 bucks. It's not, This Volcker Rule, the banks are freaking having conniptions about it. They don't want to comply with it. It's basically going to cause them to the banks not to be able to play in the markets, influence the markets, have ties with the derivatives, the hedge funds, and be market makers. So what's going to happen there? What do you think is going to happen with the price of commodities? They're going to be allowed to actually be in a free market. What do you think is going to happen to the price of silver? Right? It's going to go up. Then also, I just want to add this. Vladimir Putin's got a whole bunch of troops on the front with eastern Ukraine, and if anything happens, well, it looks like he's going to do it, no matter what the hell he says. I shouldn't laugh, but it looks like he's going to strike Ukraine, despite all the bullshit talks about, they're never going to do it. And if that happens, I'll guarantee you oil and gold and then silver's going to follow. They're going to go. They started to go up a lot during the Crimea crisis, then it backed off. But this is, I don't think this is the end of it. I read this guy as he's going to go for, he's just going to keep going until he's stopped, physically or something, with the A-10 planes blowing up his tanks. Actually, if I was on the planning board, I wasn't going to put this out here, but this is how my mind thinks. Vladimir Putin comes in there with tanks and troops, and I don't have insignia, and they're accusing the Ukraine being taken over by Nazis or some crap. Well, first I would call up, Netanyahu to let him in on a deal so he doesn't freak out. I take those A-10 planes that they're supposedly going to get rid of. I take the American insignia off of them. I put swastikas on the wings, and this way they could say it was the Nazis that did it, not the United States or anything, or the West. And they just blew up all the freaking tanks that are coming from Russia, and let them freak out about that shit. Then that would shut Vladimir Putin up big time, because, hey, the Nazis did it. We don't know who the hell did it. The Nazis did it. As long as Netanyahu knows about the plan, because he'd freak out if he saw that shit. But, you're going to play games. You're going to play games, man. What the hell, right? Anyway, just be thankful I'm not there on the planning board up there in Washington, D.C., because all hell will be breaking loose right now, man. I wouldn't be playing games with this asshole. I wouldn't be freaking sanctioning his ass, man. I'd be like doing a lot more than that. Anyway, that's what we need, actually. And I'd be finding out who those 20,000 assholes were that freaking wanted to vote back Alaska to Russia, because I got a feeling that came from Russia. And you're in this country and up to no good, Unless they're freaking somebody playing a joke and said, oh, and they click the button on, like, this is, just to be a freaking joke, maybe that was the deal too. Who the hell knows? But anyway, this Volcker Rule is coming into freaking being on April 1st, this Tuesday. That doesn't mean the sky's going to fall in and everything like that on Tuesday. That's when it starts. They have until July 2015 to be compliant. But if you actually want to look at some of the, the other things I put out about the 4 blood moons and what's going to happen with the state of Israel, and about the predictions about the 7-year cycle on the Jewish calendar, you're actually talking about July 2015 being another major financial problem, collapse. Some rabbis are talking about that. I'm not too familiar with all this stuff, but there's a lot of things that are coinciding with reality besides looking at the planets and looking at religious predictions. The Volcker Rule has to be fully compliant by July 15th, which means the banks aren't going to be screwing around playing games in the markets. So what does that tell you? Anyway, over and out. That's all I got to say, because I figure this is some news for people while they're, silver goes down 50 cents or 75 cents, and already people are saying, it's going down to $12, it's going to fall to the bottom, and I don't think so. There's a lot of things saying it's going the opposite direction. When it gets legs, it's going to sprint. That's the way silver is. It's going to go so high, you think it's going to be too high, and then it's going to go higher. That's what's going to happen. Nobody's going to know how high it's going to go. But I'm not voting for the freaking destruction of the United States. And, if Putin wants to play dirty tricks, we could play dirty tricks on him too. That's the way I look at it. The hell with that jerk, man.